Coming up on New Day at Arirang, South Korea is expected to see new daily infections surpass the 50,000 mark again on Monday as Omicron continues to grip the country. Average new cases last week doubled from the week before. U.S. President Joe Biden spoke at length with his Ukrainian counterpart about ongoing tensions with Russia, with the pair agreeing on the need to pursue diplomacy and deterrence. This comes just a day after Biden spoke on the phone with Russia's president, during which the two leaders failed to produce a breakthrough. And Sunday night was filled with joy as South Korea clinched its fifth medal at the Beijing Olympics, with the quartet in the women's 3,000-meter short track relay winning silver.
Hello and welcome to this Monday edition of New Day at Arirang. I'm Mark Broom. We hope you had a wonderful weekend and thanks for joining us for another week.
Yes, and I'm Kim Mo-gyan. It's 8 a.m. in Seoul, South Korea on February 14th. And over the next hour, we'll take a look at the big news stories of the day and get expert insights on the issues facing Korea and the world.
We certainly will. So we start with the COVID-19 situation in South Korea. The country on Monday expects to see yet another record number of new COVID-19 infections.
This comes as the country's top health authorities are set to release guidelines regarding the fourth vaccine shot. For more on this, our reporter Shin Yoon is in the studio with us. Good morning, Yoon.
Good morning.
So, like always, let's start with how many infections are we expecting for today?
Sure, so we're expecting to see another record high on this Monday, and Monday's daily tally will most likely hover in the high 50,000s. As of 9 p.m. Sunday, 53,390 infections were reported, and this was nearly twice as many cases reported compared to a week ago. The number of new COVID-19 infections has been doubling over the past few weeks due to the spread of Omicron. Just a month ago, we were seeing tallies consistently in the 3,000 or 4,000s. Now we're seeing daily figures above 50,000 a day. The number of critically ill patients is in the 200 range, which isn't putting pressure on the country's medical capacity just yet, although authorities are keeping a watch on the number of people over 60 who have been newly infected with COVID-19. And last week, the number of infected people in that age group went up 2.6-fold from a week before, mainly because of cluster infections spurring from senior care facilities.
Now, South Korea's strategy to try and tackle the spread of Omicron as much as is possible, considering how virulent it is for the population to test and treat themselves at home. But from Sunday, they kind of modified the rules somewhat because they are banning the sale online of these antigen testing kits.
That's exactly right. From Sunday, the government banned online sales of test kits to prevent scalping at marked up prices. In consideration of leftover stock, though, there will be a grace period up to the 16th, meaning that technically people can buy kits and sell kits online until Wednesday. And authorities introduced the measure to prevent a few individuals from excessive stockpiling. Officials have also limited the number of kits one can buy offline, for instance, at pharmacies and convenience stores, to only 5 kits per person. Now, there won't be any restrictions preventing people who choose to buy more than 5 by visiting multiple stores. Notwithstanding this latest measure kicking off from Sunday, many said kits were selling like hotcakes. Take a listen to what one pharmacist had to say.
I was receiving calls all day on how many kits are left. Today I have 200 ready in stock, but by 1 or 2 p.m. they'll all be sold out.
Now, apart from, limiting how many kits an individual can buy and online sales of these kits, are there any other ways that the government is trying to provide enough self-kits for everyone?
There is. Authorities are expanding the number of kits that are to be distributed to pharmacies and convenience stores nationwide. Starting Monday until February 28th, the Ministry of Food and Drug Safety will distribute a total of 30 million test kits nationwide. During the same period, an extra 24 million kits will be supplied to testing sites and for individuals at high risk, like those in senior care centers, and this for free of charge. In March, the country will add a total of 190 million self-test kits for both the private and public sector, which is actually twice the amount from February. And this comes as Prime Minister Kim Boo-kyum reportedly held a meeting with representatives of rapid antigen test kit manufacturers on Sunday, and this includes the CEOs of SE Biosensor and GenBody. The Prime Minister asked the CEOs to expand production, as these kits are a key part of the country's latest COVID-19 strategy.
Now, in the coming hours, authorities here in South Korea are going to release guidelines about who should receive a fourth booster shot. Do we have any idea yet who exactly is going to be eligible for it?
Well, not any specifics have been revealed just yet, but we're expecting those with weak immune systems or those admitted to senior care facilities to be eligible. Also, the fourth COVID-19 vaccine shot is expected to be administered 4 months after the third shot, and administration is set to start from the end of this month. Also, in regards to vaccination, I'd like to add that the country will start providing Novavax vaccines from this Monday, and Novavax is the 5th vaccine to be licensed in Korea. It's set to be administered to those over 18 years old who haven't been vaccinated or who haven't had the booster shot due to side effects.
All right, Yoon, thank you so much for your report. We'll talk to you again tomorrow.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, as always, Yoon, for that comprehensive reporting. We are going to move on to some other news, but come back to COVID-19 a little bit later. US President Joe Biden has reiterated Washington's commitment to respond swiftly and decisively to any potential Russian attack on Ukraine.
The White House says he made the remarks on Sunday during his third phone call so far this year with Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky. Kim Hyo-san has this report.
President Biden spoke at length with his Ukrainian counterpart on Sunday about the ongoing tensions with Russia, with the pair agreeing on the need to pursue diplomacy and deterrence. The White House says Biden made it clear that Washington will respond swiftly and decisively against any further Russian aggression against Ukraine. He also stressed the U.S. will act collectively with its allies and partners. Their call, which lasted about 50 minutes, came just a day after President Biden's one-hour call with Russian President Vladimir Putin, during which the two leaders failed to produce a breakthrough. As Russia intensifies pressure on Ukraine, White House National Security Advisor Jake Sullivan said Sunday that Moscow's latest ramping up of forces along the Ukrainian border indicates that an order for military action could come at any time. During a televised interview, he also insisted there had been a dramatic acceleration in the buildup of Russian forces over the past 10 days. Against such a backdrop, German Chancellor Olaf Scholz is flying to Ukraine and Russia in an effort to de-escalate tensions. Ahead of his visit, Scholz renewed his warning to Russia and underscored the need for continued diplomacy. While pundits say Germany is not expected to make any promises on arms delivered to Ukraine, Scholz could offer further financial assistance, which Kiev has been requesting. Germany has been one of Ukraine's largest donors in recent years, providing around $2.3 billion to try and stabilize the country's economy. Kim Hyo-san, Arirang News.
Frank-Walter Steinmeier was elected Sunday to a second term as Germany's president after the Special Assembly voted to give him another 5 years. His re-election was widely expected as Steinmeier enjoys broad support from most of Germany's major parties, especially as they look for continuity following Angela Merkel's decision to step down as chancellor. During his acceptance speech, Steinmeier criticized Russia's military buildup around Ukraine, adding President Putin should not underestimate the strength of democracy. During his first term, Steinmeier built a reputation as a moral compass for Germany, urging people to get COVID-19 vaccines and regularly speaking out against extremism and violence. South Korean President Moon Jae-in is due to preside over a strategic meeting to review the global supply chain as tensions simmer over Ukraine. President Moon and his top aides will discuss the possible impact of the Ukraine crisis on South Korea at the 4th Foreign Economic and Security Strategy meeting that will be held in the coming hours. This is the first time for President Moon to preside over such meeting, which are generally led by Hong Nam-gi, Seoul's Minister of Economy and Finance and Deputy Prime Minister.
All of the four main contenders in South Korea's March 9th presidential election have registered their candidacies ahead of Tuesday, which is the day they can officially start hitting the campaign trail. Ahead of that, though, attention is focused on whether the two conservative candidates will unify their campaigns, a move that, if realised, could be a game changer in a tight race to the finish line. Jonguns with the details.
The much-discussed possible conservative bloc merger has been publicly acknowledged as being on the negotiating table. In an emergency briefing on Sunday, People's Party's An Cheol-soo highlighted the need for a strategic alliance in order to achieve the people's demand for a change of government. To do so, he proposed unifying candidacy with the main opposition People Power Party's Yoon Sung-yeol, whereby the two candidates decide on an ultimate runner in a public opinion poll.
If we let the public decide who is most suitable to lead for the future, the primary shouldn't be complicated or take long.
An had initially ruled out the possibility of a merger, but shifted his stance just 24 days ahead of Election Day. The People Power Party largely welcomed the idea of merger itself, but raised concerns over the proposed method, saying that holding an opinion poll may trigger division among the opposition bloc, which could be an advantage for the ruling Democratic Party rival Lee Jae-myung. Yoon echoed the party's sentiment.
I positively review the proposal. I will think about the proposed public opinion poll, but it does leave me some sense of regret.
In fact, the party's chairman Lee Jun-suk explicitly ruled out a primary as an option, citing Yoon leading on in the polls by a large margin. Instead, he called on An to voluntarily pull out of the running. With the two sides at odds over how to move forward, any actual merger could take some time. The best scenario would be to come to an agreement before the 28th when ballots are printed, so that the changes could be reflected on paper. Watching developments will be the DP's Lee Jae-myung, who has pushed for forming a coalition government with An. Lee, when asked about whether the plan is still valid, refrained from answering directly.
Taking care of people's livelihoods is the most important agenda in politics. It is time to put people at the center and move forward.
The DP has so far not given any official comment as it closely watches events unfold, given the major impact a conservative merger could bring to the current neck-and-neck race between Lee and Yoon. Meanwhile, the minor Progressive Justice Party's Kim Sang-jung expressed regret over An giving into big party politics. Jonguns, Arirang News.
Now it's time for Onpoint, where we speak to experts to delve deeper into the biggest news stories in the spotlight right now. The number of new daily COVID-19 cases in South Korea reached a new record high on Sunday, topping 56,000. The rampant spread of Omicron driving the surge, and it looks like it's going to get worse before it gets better.
A local state-run think tank recently estimated the figure could be in excess of 350,000 new cases a day by early March. For more, we connect to Dr. Alice Tan, internist at Ms. Midi Women's Hospital in Seoul. Good morning, Dr. Tan.
Good morning.
So with this current rate of spread, it seems like a lot of us are eventually going to get the Omicron variant. So if we're feeling under the weather, what symptoms should we look out for?
Right. Someone had come up with the term flu-rona to describe a combination of influenza and COVID-19. And I think that's probably an adequate description of the kind of symptoms that you might expect with the Omicron variant. In other words, there can be a fever, fatigue, cough, headache, runny or stuffy nose, and sore throat. Some people have complained about body achiness, especially backaches as well. But as you said, this winter season, if you have any cold or flu symptoms, the first thought that comes to mind should be, is this COVID? And then the second thing to do is to get tested.
Okay, that makes a lot of sense. Now, South Korean officials, as we heard from Shin Ye-eun just prior to speaking to you, there are plans now for this 4th booster shot being given in South Korea, most likely to high-risk groups first, as you would expect. What do you think this plan is going to look like? And also, do we have data that really shows now, at this point, now we're on the 3rd, 4th booster shot, that these booster shots mean fewer hospitalizations and fewer deaths?
Right. Well, we do know that the 3rd dose booster has been effective in preventing severe disease. We do have data to support that. In terms of the 4th dose, a 4th dose has been recommended for people with immunocompromise. This is a recommendation that's already been in place. But in terms of applying a recommendation of a 4th dose to other vulnerable groups, such as the elderly or even the public in general, unfortunately, there are not a lot of data to support the use of a 4th dose. The Sheba Medical Center in Israel performed a small trial of using a 4th dose of the Pfizer vaccine. And what they found was, after the implementation of a 4th dose, antibody levels did go up. And they actually went up higher than after the 3rd dose. But unfortunately, because now the Omicron variant is the variant that's dominant around the world, even the high antibody levels from a 4th dose were not enough to effectively block infection due to the Omicron variant. And so that is the biggest concern. If we were dealing with the Delta or previous variants of concern, certainly a 4th dose probably would have been helpful, but with the Omicron, it's hard to know.
Now, let's turn to Novavax. The vaccine is due to be distributed here in South Korea today, and the government hopes unvaccinated people will be more inclined to getting this shot because it's not an mRNA vaccine. So can you explain to us how the two types of vaccines differ, and do you think many unvaccinated people will get it eventually?
Hopefully, for the 2 million or so unvaccinated and under-vaccinated adults in Korea, and the people who have been hesitant to get an mRNA vaccine because it's such a new vaccine technology, I hope that the Novavax vaccine offers a safe and effective alternative for them. So if anyone has received a flu vaccine in the past or a hepatitis B vaccine in the past, then they should know that the Novavax vaccine uses the exact same technology, the same platform. And so there's really nothing new about this platform. It's the same old platform, but it's been updated because it's using a nanoparticle. It's a recombinant protein nanoparticle vaccine that has been adjuvanted. Adjuvanted means there's a special chemical that gives the vaccine a boost in terms of its immune response. In terms of the side effect profile, also a very favorable side effect profile. In terms of side effects, most were mild or moderate in the phase 3 trials, and they were short in duration, very transient, lasting maybe a day or two. And so for the people who have been hesitant about using a COVID-19 vaccine, one, because the technology was so new, you don't have to worry about that with Novavax. And then secondly, because of the potential of severe side effects, that also seems to be less of a concern with the Novavax vaccine. So I hope that this can be deployed among our unvaccinated, under-vaccinated, and our the people who had difficulty in accessing the vaccine previously.
Yeah, we speak to Professor Cowling at the University of Hong Kong, and he gave a similar glowing review of the Novavax vaccine, so that's good to hear. But finally, on the social distancing guidelines, it's fair to say, it seems like to me anyway, that the social distancing guidelines we have in place currently are like a hangover from what we were dealing with when we had Delta and all the previous strains. It hasn't really been modified that much. Considering Omicron is so transmissible, would you think that at some point the government's going to have to go back to the drawing board and really overhaul how these guidelines look now? Or perhaps, like other countries have done, just scrap them altogether and let's go back to normal life living with the virus?
Well, first of all, I have to say that there are few countries around the world that have taken such a vested interest in protecting its people, taken such a sense of responsibility for all COVID patients, as has South Korea done. In terms of the Omicron variant, Dr. Mike Alsterholm, who is one of the premier infectious disease and epidemiology experts around the world, he says trying to block Omicron is like trying to block the wind. Basically, it's impossible. You can divert the wind, but you can't block it altogether. Our strategy, of course, has been to prioritize the protection of the vulnerable groups. And we did this through a very aggressive booster campaign. And I think that was the strategy that's been working so far. In terms of the social distancing measures, my concern is this. I don't think we've had enough of a discussion about the effects of long COVID. And, we know so far that it can affect up to 1/3 of everyone who's been infected with COVID-19, even people who had mild symptoms. And I think this message needs to be broadcast more. More people need to know that even if Omicron causes mild disease, so-called mild disease, there is a possibility of long-haul COVID even after Omicron. And so people should take their personal responsibility to try not to get infected, because there's so many unanswered questions about what post-acute COVID syndrome will look like after Omicron. And if we let, millions of people, say, potentially get infected with Omicron, that can be a huge burden on society and also a personal burden, a medical burden on individuals.
All right, Dr. Tan, as always, thank you so much for your analysis, and we hope to talk to you again soon.
Thank you.
Thank you. Turning now to our coverage of the Beijing Olympics, there was joy in the air Sunday night as the South Korean quartet in the women's 3,000-meter short track relay won the silver medal, the nation's 5th medal at the Beijing Games.
The race itself was a nail-biter as South Korea left it late to come from behind to grab a place on the podium. Our Kim Bo-kyung tells us more.
The 4 women in South Korea's short track relay team had what it took Sunday to win the silver medal in the 3,000-meter event. Choi Min-jung, Kim Ah-rang, Lee Yoo-bin, and Seo Hui-min finished second after a big comeback, crossing the line in a time of 4 minutes 3.63 seconds. The race had viewers on the edge of their seats as the quartet started in last position and remained at the back of the pack for the majority of the race. It was not until the final 3 laps of the 27-lap race that Kim Ah-rang powered through to third place, racing past China, with Choi Min-jung keeping up the momentum and eventually sealing second for South Korea. The South Korean women's team has won medals in 3 consecutive Olympics, gold in Sochi in 2014 and gold 4 years later in Pyeongchang. Choi, Kim, and Lee were members of the gold medal winning team in Pyeongchang. In Beijing, Shim Seok-hee was replaced by Seo Hui-min due to her off-ice issues. The team from the Netherlands, led by star skater Suzanne Schulting, won the gold in Sunday's relay. China had to settle for bronze. President Moon Jae-in sent a congratulatory message to the South Korean quartet, saying he was grateful they showed the value of going together, while applauding their efforts and encouraging them for their remaining races. Also on the ice, 1,500-meter Olympic gold medalist Hwang Dae-hun was in the running for his second medal in Beijing on Sunday, but he was disqualified in the semifinals of the men's 500-meter race. Hwang was penalized for an illegal late pass causing contact as he tried to move forward from fourth only to hit a Canadian skater before skidding into the padded wall. However, Hwang still has a chance to bring home another medal as he will represent South Korea in the final of the men's 5,000-meter relay final on Wednesday. Kim Bo-kyung, Arirang News.
South Korea's women's curling team will compete against the U.S. and Japan on Monday. Nicknamed Team Kim, the team's next match against the U.S. starts at around 10 a.m. Korea time. A round-robin session with Japan will take place after 9 p.m. Winning both games will be key for Team Korea if they want to advance into the semifinals, as they lost to China on Sunday. The top 4 of 10 teams advance to the semifinals.
American Erin Jackson has become the first black female speed skater to win a gold medal at a Winter Olympics. The 29-year-old won Sunday's women's 500-meter final with a time of 37.04 seconds. Although she placed third in the U.S. trials, her teammate Brittany Bowe gave up her spot in the spirit of the Olympics, reportedly saying Jackson had a better chance of winning a medal. South Korea's Kim Min-sun finished 7th.
And now we cross over to our Oh Se-young for Global Insight and an in-depth look at important developments in world affairs.
Thanks, Yoon. It is indeed time for Global Insight, where we speak to experts from around the world on issues making headlines. After launching 7 rounds of missile tests this year and threatening to resume testing nuclear weapons, there's been relative calm over the last 2 weeks from North Korea. But with key state anniversaries coming up in the next couple of weeks and months, and US researchers detecting a missile launching site likely to later host intercontinental ballistic missiles, the threat from Pyongyang is as pressing as ever. To discuss the latest on the regime, we're joined by Sue Kim, policy analyst at RAND Corporation and former CIA analyst. We also have Ramon Pacheco-Pardo, head of department and professor of international relations at King's College London. Very warm welcome to you both. It's lovely to have you both back. And well, let's start with you, Sue. Now, we've seen new research from CSIS in the US, which shows that North Korea has been building a base strategically located for future ICBM launches, apparently. What is the significance of this facility and what kind of role would it play?
So we know that this location is, it's the same province where North Korea conducted its January 30th IRBM. It's likely going to house ICBMs, if not IRBMs. The construction took place 20 years ago. It's not yet completed. They cited resource constraints. But we also know, I think, that it's also one of the 20 undeclared missile bases that North Korea operates. I think this shows persistence on the part of the North Korean regime. Sanctions, negotiations, diplomacy, dialogue, none of this is really going to deter the regime from achieving its ambitions. And if that hasn't been made clear, I think the recent report, as well as the latest test where the North Koreans actually successively demonstrated, of course, improved capabilities, but also it's going to be more difficult for the United States and South Korea to try to intercept these missiles. So it's about lethality, and I think it's also about the North Korean willpower.
And now, Ramon, North Korea made sure that there were plenty of fireworks going around back in January, and well, it even warned that it might break its moratorium on long-range missiles and nuclear weapons testing, of course. How far do you think it's prepared to go? Do you think we're going to see more advanced versions of the Hwasong missiles? Do you think it's going to fire more advanced missiles than its Hwasong 12 that it showed last month?
I would imagine, right? North Korea has made clear that it is going to continue to improve its missile programs. It has also made clear that it's not bound by the moratorium, self-imposed moratorium from a few years ago. And it has to test these new technologies. both for technical reasons, but also, of course, because of for political reasons, right? To send a message to the US, to send a message to South Korea, other countries such as Japan, for example, as well. So I would expect more missile tests with new technologies being unveiled. And nuclear test is quite different. North Korea has indicated that they want to be treated or wants to behave as a responsible nuclear power. And responsible nuclear powers don't necessarily need to conduct new nuclear tests. So I think there is a difference here between missile tests, which I think North Korea will resume at some point, and nuclear tests, which I think North Korea may not be ready yet to take such a significant step.
Well, how worried do you think we should be about a possible resumption of a nuclear test by the North? That's to you, Ramon.
Is it for me?
Sorry, I don't think, the question went through clearly. So, Ramon, how do you see the possibility of the resumption of nuclear tests by the North?
Oh, yes, sorry. So, I mean, as I was indicating, I think this is less likely for a couple of reasons. First of all, for political reasons, Kim Jong-un declared after the 6 nuclear tests, second ICBM test of 2017, that North Korea had become a nuclear power. And North Korea has tried to indicate that it is going to be a responsible nuclear power, and responsible nuclear powers don't need to conduct more tests. And secondly, I think that would be a major step that could lead even to more sanctions being imposed by the UN Security Council, because I think this is the only circumstance under which China and Russia may agree to impose new sanctions on North Korea. And North Korea may not want to take this step to create more problems with China especially, but also to have more sanctions being imposed, and then if in the future are going to be rolled back, it would take longer, of course.
Now, see, of course, North Korea has threatened that it might break its self-imposed moratorium on testing long-range missiles and nuclear weapons. Do you think that is what it intends to do?
Well, I think Kim Jong-un has signaled more than once, I think, North Korea has said that it's going to, it warned us that it would break the moratorium. But I would say that from the get-go, when Kim Jong-un announced that he would be imposing this moratorium, there was no sincerity that he was going to keep it for the long run. I think he was doing it so that he would buy time and also buy credibility from the United States and South Korea during the negotiations. So the signaling, I think, is important, but I also think that looking at the intentions of the North Korean regime, the movements, the activities that we've seen so far indicate that, he has not been sincere from the beginning.
And Sue, well, in what ways do you think that the North might scale up its provocations? What key capabilities or developments should we really be looking out for?
Sure. So over the last couple months, we saw a number of missile/projectile tests being conducted by North Korea of successive, I would say, distance and range. What is problematic, I think, is the fact that now we're not just talking about a longer range missile, but we're seeing North Korea launch these missiles from different locations. So add to the payload, add to the range, add to the altitude, we're talking about unpredictability. And I think this is where it's alarming South Korea and the United States and the broader region, because it's one thing to be able to defend and to intercept the missiles, but if you don't know where it's going to be coming from, how are you going to be able to defend the territory? And I think that's where the emphasis should be placed is, of course, North Korea is going to continue to demonstrate, this colorful array of missile technologies. But the question is, are we going to be able to respond or preempt?
And Ramon, well, now there's talk of an April crisis that's impending. How does the North usually celebrate the birthday of its state founder, Kim Il-sung, who was born on April 15th? And, well, what should we expect to see this year?
I would imagine that we should expect a parade or new missiles being unveiled or new technologies being unveiled. We have seen in the past, for example, North Korea conducting tests trying to put satellites into orbit, or what it claims are satellites, put them into orbit. So this type of tests that may or may not cross red lines, such as the UN Security Council resolutions. But at the very least, I would expect North Korea trying to show to the rest of the world that it has new technologies ready to, as it says, protect the country, right, from hostile forces, as the way North Korea would put it. And I think this will come actually interestingly after the South Korean election. We will know who the new president is. I don't think this will completely change the plans of North Korea, but it might try to fine-tune its messaging depending on who wins, right? Because we have seen how Yoon, the conservative candidate, he seems to be indicating that he is going to move towards deterrence, strengthening the alliance with the US, and Lee, the liberal candidate, may be indicating that he will want to pursue diplomacy. So this might affect the way North Korea decides to behave in April before the new president is inaugurated in May.
And Ramon, with less than 100 days left in office, President Moon seems to have accepted that there may not be a last-minute breakthrough in inter-Korean relations, let alone an end-of-war declaration. So what should South Korea's position be, or what kind of message should Mr. Moon send to the North in the remaining weeks of his presidency?
I guess at this point, the message from South Korea probably would be, don't try to distort the elections. We know that South Koreans don't vote based on what North Korea does or doesn't do. But I would imagine that President Moon wouldn't want any surprises during these next few weeks before the election that may sway the vote of some of the voters in South Korea. I should also say that I think over the past few weeks and months, President Moon has been really focusing on other foreign policy issues. We saw, for example, his trip to Australia that was made a big splash. There is also talk about potentially having some sort of meeting with maybe potentially President Biden. This could be online. It could be part of a multilateral setting. So I think there are different alternatives for President Moon to focus on foreign policy that don't involve North Korea. And I would assume that his messaging to Pyongyang is going to be really try to keep quiet over the next few weeks until the vote takes place.
And so now, February 16th is the 80th birthday of Kim Jong-un's late father, Kim Jong-il. And now North Korea says that it's going to celebrate the day in grand fashion. So what can we really expect from this birthday bash? Do you think North Korea will start testing missiles again now that the Beijing Olympics are over?
So this is the 80th anniversary, not the 82nd, not the 86th. So it's an important date for the North Koreans. And COVID-19, the sanctions, the natural disasters notwithstanding, it'll be an opportunity for Kim Jong-un to demonstrate both to the outside world as well as to the North Korean population that the country still remains standing strong. And I think what's problematic, of course, is to the rest of us, it's another way for North Korea to be confrontational. But I think also from a domestic perspective, this is only going to put greater pressure on the North Korean population to support the regime in its weapons ambitions, which also just means that there will be greater sacrifices, less attention to the real suffering of the North Korean population. So, again, a great opportunity for Kim Jong-un to maintain his line towards the outside world, but also it's a way for him to maintain his line towards his own people, I would say.
And Ramon, now over the weekend we saw the South Korean foreign minister meet with his counterparts from Japan and the US to really discuss these provocations from North Korea. And meanwhile, Russia and China, they also held a discussion between them as well, discussing who they called their friendly neighbour. So, well, with these two sort of blocs forming in terms of when responding to North Korea, do you think there's going to continue to be this kind of divide when it comes to the global response to Pyongyang's provocations?
I think so. I think China and Russia have made very clear that from their perspective, North Korea is behaving responsibly, and it is the fault of the US and maybe even South Korea that there are no negotiations taking place. China and Russia have also indicated that they think that the current sanctions regime is counterproductive. Therefore, they are not going to support the strengthening of the tightening of the sanctions on North Korea. And we see that the position of the US especially is very different, right? It says that the ball is on the North Korean court and that North Korea should accept the offer of dialogue. And I think we have seen in recent months, and even the South Korean position, I think, has also turned more sour on North Korea, as there has been no progress in inter-Korean relations really for a couple of years now. So I think that it is true that you have these two blocs, and I think unless or until there is a resumption of dialogue really between the two Koreas, between North Korea and the US, I think we're going to see these two blocs continuing to be in place.
Well, I'm afraid that's all we have time for today, so this is where we'll leave the interview. That was Soo Kim, policy analyst at Rand Corporation and former CIA analyst. We also had Ramon Pacheco-Pardo, head of department and professor of international relations at King's College London. Thank you both so much for your time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Huge demand for workers in the IT sector is attracting young people who fancy a career change. Many are learning to code in so-called IT boot camps in a bid to find a job in it. These days, South Korea has tens of thousands of young people enrolled in these courses at any given time. Yoon reports.
These people sitting in front of computers are not playing games. They are students learning web or app program development. From 9 a.m. to 9 p.m., with breaks only for meals and to go to the restroom, these people work in front of a computer for at least 12 hours almost every day for 3 months. These highly intensive courses are being called IT boot camp. Students at these IT boot camps come from having had various unrelated jobs, from former airline employees to liberal arts academy instructors. And some pay up to roughly $8,000 for a 3-month course.
I felt that the world was changing quickly. Thinking of where I'd be in 10 years, I thought the IT industry is where I could have a career, so I applied for this program.
There are 10 large coding academies in the Seoul area alone. At each, the number of students per year exceeds 10,000, and that number is said to more than double every year. According to Statistics Korea, the number of computer programming-related workers increased 2.4 times in the 10 years between 2010 and 2020. And with the continuing growth in the development within the IT industry, that number is expected to rise even more. Behind this craze is the so-called nekarakube employment, referring to the high-income big-name companies Naver, Kakao, Line Plus, Coupang, and Baemin that offer open-door job opportunities based on coding skills.
The demand and supply of developers is very imbalanced right now. With such intense training, potential IT technicians can prepare to be scouted by big companies constantly searching for IT technicians who can perform at a similar level to the already employed technicians.
With employment rates to the nekarakube companies reaching 80%, the craze for these IT boot camps is only expected to grow. 이은진, Arirang News.
Now, for a look at news from around the world, we have our Eastern Jay standing by in Arirang's newsroom. Good morning, SJ.
Good morning to you guys.
So let's start off in Japan, where residents of Fukushima Prefecture held a rally against a plan to discharge nuclear contaminated water.
That's right. So it's not just the international community that's against the plan to discharge the wastewater into the sea, but also citizens residing in the Fukushima Prefecture. Now, protests were held in Fukushima's Iwaki City, where more than a dozen residents raised banners calling for the cancellation of the move, while also demanding protection for the ocean. The Tokyo Electric Power Company previously said that it plans to release contaminated water about a kilometer offshore through an undersea tunnel, but the plan did little to dispel the concerns of the local residents.
Dumping nuclear contaminated water into the sea is an issue which not only concerns Japan, but also concerns the whole world, creatures in the ocean, and our food.
Now, of course, last April, then Japanese Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga said TEPCO would be allowed to release nuclear contaminated water from Fukushima into the Pacific Ocean starting in 2023, leading to massive outcry from both the local residents and the international community. Now, Afghanistan has denounced the U.S.'s plans to unfreeze the country's central bank's assets to compensate victims of the September 11th terrorist attack, claiming that the funds belong to the Afghan people. Now, the outcry comes as U.S. President Joe Biden on Friday signed an executive order on blocked assets of the Afghanistan Bank, which includes plans to use half of the assets to compensate victims of 9/11. Now, roughly $7 billion is to be divided equally among victims, while the other half is being transferred to a consolidated account held at the Federal Reserve Bank of New York for the Afghan people and to keep it out of the hands of the Taliban. Now, along with the Taliban, the people of Afghanistan voiced their objection, stressing that the U.S. is wrongfully using Afghan money, adding that it should be the U.S. that is compensating Afghanistan. Now, Swiss voters on Sunday approved restrictions on tobacco advertising, with 57% in favor. Now, the ban will see advertising in the newspapers, cinemas, the internet, at events, and on billboards removed. Supporters of the ban say such advertisements encourage young people to smoke. According to the Swiss government, smoking kills 9,500 people each year in the country. And finally, the Beijing Winter Games panda mascot has been all the rage recently, but 6-month-old giant panda cub Lele has also been capturing attention after becoming the first to be born in Singapore. Now, Singaporeans have been lining up to catch a glimpse of the cub, even some queuing up multiple times just to spend a bit more time with him. Now, the birth of Lele was the result of extensive collaboration between a team from Singapore and the panda experts in China. However, unfortunately for the Singaporeans, when Lele turns 2, he'll be sent to China and the country's panda breeding program.
Good morning. Have an umbrella handy on your way out. Right now, easterly winds are dropping a mix of rain and snow on the east coast. Then inner regions will see rain and snow later in the day. Mountainous regions in Gangwon-do could see up to 10 centimeters of snowfall. Seoul and remaining inland regions will see 1 to 3 centimeters. In fact, a heavy snow advisory is in place for mountainous regions in Gangwon-do province this morning, while dry alerts in eastern regions have been lifted. But now Jeollanam-do province is under dry advisory. Well, bearable morning temperatures to begin the day. Daegu and Gwangju beginning the day at 1 degree Celsius. Afternoon highs stay on the mild side. In fact, it looks to be one last mild day before much colder air arrives again tomorrow. Seoul will see a wintry mix around the evening commute. Then that winter precipitation will let up tonight or tomorrow at dawn, but will trigger freezing air to the country this week. With that, here's a look at the weather conditions around the world.
And that's all we have for now. Mark and I will be back for another episode of New Day at Arirang at 8 a.m. Korea time on Tuesday. I'm Kim Mo-gyan.
And I'm Mark Broom. Have a wonderful day. Great start to the week. And thank you as always for watching. Until next time, goodbye.
When the lantern of